my tongue. Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo, where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes, hello and welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course. It is Thursday, so it means it's time for our Thursday Trends episode. And my guest this week, helping me break it all down, friend of the show, coming back for a second time. He is a poet and the chief of staff at the Nuyorican Poets Cafe in New York City. My guy, Nicco Diaz, how you feeling, my bro?
I'm good, brother. Happy to be back on the podcast.
I love it, man.
Yeah, we're reporting live from the Nuyorican Poets Cafe.
I was gonna say, reporting live from the legendary Nuyorican Poets Cafe adds a little extra sauce to it. You know, we'll hopefully the spirit of those who came before us will come through you today.
Yeah, for sure. They're here, man. I hear them. Nah, that's the audience upstairs. So if you hear some background noise, but no, yeah, it's a Wednesday, so we have our shows here. So we have our open mic, and then we'll have our slam at 9. So gotta kind of like I literally just came from performing a new piece that I wrote, and plugging my open mic that's happening on Saturday. It's an LGBTQ open mic that we have happening here. It's the first one ever at the cafe. So Pride Month is coming, so things are busy, things are cooking, and yeah, I'm excited to take some time to catch up with you, man. It's been a minute.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to see you. I love all the stuff that you guys are putting together there, and yeah, it's definitely an exciting time. Pride Month in New York City is obviously a huge deal, as it should be. The Puerto Rican Day Parade is just around the corner as well. So a lot of exciting things. Yeah, man, it feels good. It kind of is. That's like the kickoff to the summer. You know what I mean? So it's a nice little way to get in there and start those good vibes for the summer for sure.
Yeah, I got my PR flag crop top that I'll be wearing.
Nice.
So it'll be the beginning of my summer for sure.
I love it, man. I gotta get my fit ready. I don't know if I can top that, but man. So we're gonna dive into a bunch of different things today, man. I want to get your perspective on a few. There's a lot of important things happening right now, important conversations. One of which was this new report from the Johns Hopkins Institute for Educational Policy, and it's finding, and this isn't even a shocker if I think back to school, but it's finding that a large portion of Latin history is missing from school textbooks. So we're gonna get into that story, which obviously is a huge kind of disappointment, and also, man, kind of on the heels of what we've been seeing in places like Florida with these really harsh immigration bills. You're seeing a senseless act of violence from somebody who is showed their racism, and the rhetoric that they're using for these things is not an isolated incident. So we'll talk about a really tragic story that happened in California. We'll also touch on Hollywood a little bit. You have Eva Longoria kind of calling out the Hollywood structure, particularly on behalf of Latinas. So we'll get into that. And then, man, on the positive side of things, Bad Bunny dropped a new banger, and it seems like it's definitely changed everybody's mind on them kind of, I don't know if they were canceling Benito, but they were a little pissed off at him. It seems like everybody's back for the summer now that we got our banger. So we'll talk a bit about that, man. But let's start with some of the heavier stuff, the nonsense in a segment we call For the People in the Back.
Say it louder for the people in the back. All right, so let's start here first and foremost with this story where it was a study that found over 80% of key events in U.S. Latino history were missing from textbooks, right? So this is according to a new report from the Johns Hopkins Institute for Educational Policy and Unidos US, and they're saying that much of U.S. Latino history has been omitted from the textbooks, finding that 80% of key events in Latin history are conspicuous by their absence from core textbooks. And a quote here they have is that only 28 of 222 important topics were covered well, leaving out many aspects of the Mexican-American War, the Spanish-American War, the U.S. acquisition of Puerto Rico, the Panama Canal, the modern civil rights movement, Cold War politics, and legal developments shaping the Latino experience, such as Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, and racial segregation. And this is according to that report. Now, did you go to elementary school in the Bronx?
I went to school in the city, so I went in El Barrio.
Okay.
So another Puerto Rican enclave.
Yep.
And every day on the 4 train from the Bronx down to El Barrio back up. And the reason why is my mom thought the schools in our local community weren't as good as the ones in El Barrio.
Yeah.
And it turns out right. I mean, I'm living proof of that. You know,
Yeah.
a lot of the folks in my building who went to school, like I don't know how many of them graduated college, but I was one of the lucky few to make it. So yeah, but I'm a New York City public school product for sure, and proud of it. So
yeah, I mean, listen, Sam. I mean, I went to elementary school in the Bronx, and then finished up the rest of my kind of middle school in Jersey. But you know, I asked just to kind of get a gauge for our experience. You know, I think, man, I definitely say it was night and day for me in New York and Jersey. And when it comes to diversity and representation, I know when I went to school in the Bronx, we had, you know, cultural history days, and we had different plays that, you know, focus on Black history as well as Latin history and all these different things. And that was gone once I kind of got into the suburbs. But even with that, you know, I think the knowledge and the teachings of Latin history were very minimal, even, you know, in the Bronx, and almost virtually non-existent when I got into Jersey. So like, this is obviously, it's important to have studies like this one because it puts it on paper and they can give you a percentage, but this isn't surprising to me whatsoever. And I think even when I think about some of the questions I had when I got older, it was like, where were Latinos during the civil rights movement, right? There's like no, you know, history reported about where we were during that time. I didn't find out about the Young Lords until I saw a documentary when I was probably in my late 20s at that point, you know. So the history obviously has not been told, and it's been omitted from history books. I'm curious if you've kind of had the same experience growing up.
Oh man, so I went to a couple of public schools in El Barrio, but the one that was the main public school I went to was called BBMS, Bilingual Bicultural Mini School. And it was founded specifically by Boricuas in El Barrio to promote bilingualism, but also biculturalism.
Sure.
I'll say that 5 times fast. Biculturalism by extension of being Boricua, and at the same time teaching sort of the American curriculum that was put out by New York State. Right. So every day we would do assemblies, or not every day, but whenever we do assemblies, we would do 3 national anthems. We would do the American national anthem, the La Tierra de Borinquen, Donde Nacido Yo, and then we would do the Black national anthem as well. So it was very culturally responsive in that regard. And so I was aware of at least had an understanding that like our cultures mattered. But in terms of like history and learning the history of the historic carnage that the United States has wrought against people of color and anybody that was in the way of their manifest destiny. Not until I got to college, and where I was a Latino studies minor, because I did feel that I knew that I loved my culture and I was proud to be Latino, but I didn't have the know-how. And even still, like I still am reclaiming history in a lot of ways. As I learn about all of the different things, like I've been kind of going on this journey right now, reclaiming my history by like reading up on a lot of books by like, you know, The War Against All Puerto Ricans by Nelson Dennis. There's this great book here in the Bronx called Daughters of the Stone by Dalma Llanos Figueroa, and it's about the slave history in Puerto Rico. It's a fiction, but it takes that piece of history and puts it on display and humanizes it. Sure. And so for me, literature, poetry has been a place where I've been able to sort of find what's been lacking in our textbooks. And in addition to like being a student, I was also a teacher for 3 years. Education was kind of like my work before being a poet. And, you know, a lot of the textbooks are based off Texas, because Texas is such a large, you know, student population that a lot of other states just buy the textbooks from Texas and then they ship those. And so Texas is really dictating a lot of the history that's being taught around the country. And if we look at who's in charge of Texas and sort of the the bent of their politic, it's very much about sanitizing the history to make it like the United States has been infallible and has never done anything wrong. And these brown and black people just kind of like got here because of slavery, boom, and the war, boom, and then they're just been here. So yeah, it's outrageous. And it's definitely like intentional, you know, like it's conspicuous. It's like, yeah, you know.
Yeah, it's funny, man, because what struck me about what you're talking about is that you went to a very specific high school that was founded by, you know, people who look like you. And then you studied it in college and all these things, and you still felt like you were having to go off and educate yourself. And now I put myself in the shoes of someone like myself, and even somebody maybe who didn't even have at least the younger education that he had and exposure to so much diversity, specifically people of color. You know, as far as I had an incredible black teacher when I was younger, you know, a strong black woman who was very much about her culture and took it very seriously. And Black History Month was a huge deal. You know, I remember in like first and second grade, and I learned so much about, you know, about that there. And you know, there was a large Latin population in our school as well in the Bronx. So, you know, you had teachers who were very much passionate about teaching that story as well. So that I was fortunate, but again, I was incredibly young. And I think about other Latinos who maybe were born in other areas where there's not a predominantly Latin population or a teaching staff that, you know, cares that much about making sure that these stories are being told. And it's no wonder why so many of us don't know our history. And then even I'm thinking, you know, because it's interesting how in places like the Bronx, how closely in the community and sort of culturally we are tied to our black brothers and sisters, right? And I think it's because even though their stories weren't told as they should have been, they at least had a seat at the table to a degree. We heard a lot about, you know, the you know, civil rights movement and things like that, right? There was no getting around those stories when it came to teaching American history. So I think it's like that's why so many of us love hip hop and love hip hop culture and see ourselves in that, because we don't see ourselves in white culture, right? And that's why I think it's now where it's like, man, we're all, I think, like you said, on a journey, or at least a lot of people are that I speak to, where it's like, how do we kind of reclaim our ownness at this point, right? And not that there's anything wrong with being a part of that culture, but at the same time, there are, you know, sort of areas where that's just not, you know, your conversation to be had, right? Particularly when we talk about things of race and all these, you know, specifically when we were talking about, you know, a lot that we've seen happen over the last few years. And I'm kind of just weaving in and out of this as a means to say, I think it's why so many of us have been lost for so long, right? Where it was almost like you had to choose, either you are going to sort of tie yourself closer to black culture, or you're going to try and assimilate into white culture if you have the proximity of, you know, the skin color that allows you to do so, right? And that has obviously contributed to us losing our history. But again, as you said, that is by design, right? It's either those who can assimilate and want to, you know, sort of leave their own cultural ties behind, we'll welcome them to the table, you know, because they kind of continue on our message. And then those of you who have no choice but to be recognized as a black man in the street or a black woman in the street because of your skin tone, you know, you're going to now go off and be sort of thrown off to the, you know, in the group that we don't care about and gets the scraps that everybody else, you know, of everybody else. And education obviously being so big a part of that, and then now it has the ramifications for, I think, why as a community we don't have the footing that we should, as far as in politics, or why it feels like we're at times generationally behind when it comes to you know, anything, financial literacy, you know, ownership, having a seat at the table and things like Hollywood, when we're going to talk about that later down the line. It's why now in 2023, because of someone like Bad Bunny, we're finally accepted into the mainstream, you know. All of those things are tied into our erasure, essentially, I feel like.
Yeah. I mean, it's, you know, particularly being Puerto Rican, Nuyorican is a unique experience, because it's coupled with, obviously, like, we are children of the diaspora, so we are black in a lot, like a lot of us, and also we're also one of the last standing colonies in the world, and there's all of this coupled with like we were given the gift of citizenship, but yet it was also, well, we're going to take your island, we're going to take your culture, we're going to rob you of everything, and you're going to be a human resource. And so when I think about, you know, the oral histories that were maintained throughout the Black community, and how there was just like there was a clear like distinction of like Black versus white in a lot of ways, systemically at least. Obviously, there were folks who were multiracial and passed and did other things, and but I think with Latinos, and particularly the folks from the Caribbean, who kind of like, where do they fit? It's like our histories from our families are a lot younger, because 1898 was when the Spanish-American War happened, and was obtained by the United States. And then it was, the language was changed from, the national language was changed from Spanish to English overnight. All of the wealth was taken. And then people were put into wars. So all of the men were like, it was just like there was a lot of pain. And so when I talked to even my grandmother or my great grandmother, like also the language barrier, like I don't speak Spanish that well and they speak Spanish completely, my great grandmother. So there was that barrier that existed culturally, because they grew up partly in Puerto Rico and then had to immigrate here and then all that stuff. And so that pain really silenced. It was easier to not talk about things for us. And that was like how we just coped with it. And now a lot of people in our generation, like doing podcasts, doing poetry, art, like we're like Bad Bunny being an artist, like trying to reclaim our voices as Puerto Ricans, as Latinos. And it is, it's important for us to do that. And I think like, if it's not going to happen in the textbooks, like we need to be the stewards of our own history. There's a great author who won the Pulitzer Prize, Kiala Alegria Hughes. She helped write she was a co-writer on In the Heights, won a Tony Award for that. She's produced Vivo, and she's an incredible voice in the Puerto Rican diaspora. And she told me this quote, every time an elder dies, a library burns. And that's really put the urgency on me in my own art to talk to my grandmother about her experience, talk to my mom about her experience, and me given the gift of my pen and my talent on the mic, like I'm able to carry those stories and infuse it into my poetry. And so I think it's really incumbent upon us, us too, and then the listeners here to really just like learn the histories personally, because and then obviously, like if we can get a group to advocate and do stuff, but yeah, we have to really be the stewards of our own history, because nobody else is going to do it, you know?
Yeah, no, that's a fact. And even the last thing I'll say on it, because you touched on the book War Against All Puerto Ricans, you know, even when the colonization of Puerto Rico is spoken about in the textbooks, it's framed from this vantage point of the great white savior, right? And it's almost like the U.S. saved these people from poverty and gave them citizenship and all these different things. And then, you know, as an adult, you read a book like War Against All Puerto Ricans, and I remember just in the audiobook hearing it and in my car and just like being overcome with anger, because I'm realizing the violence and the lack of humanity that the U.S. showed for the people of Puerto Rico, and the suppression of what many of them wanted at that point, you know, and it's completely opposite of what we were taught growing up, right? And it makes it incredibly difficult to feed now into the propaganda of America the Great and this American pride, when you know that America has been and continues to be just as vicious as all the other countries that we look down upon, you know, for invading other countries or the mistreatment of their citizens and things like that. And I wouldn't have that vantage point, that education, and that ability to look at it from a different perspective if I didn't challenge myself to read that, right? And that's why, like you're saying, that idea of like learning your history, even if it's not required, is so incredibly important, because, you know, it like, man, that quote you just said about when, you know, an elder dies, a library is burned, essentially, right? Like, if we don't do it, our stories are never going to be told, right? They're scarcely told now, but they'll never be told if we don't actually take the the time upon ourselves to talk to those people in our family and read up on it and make sure that, the generations to come know about these stories, because it's also important for their survival and for the, ability of our cultures and our communities to flourish, at the end of the day.
Sure.
And that's why, and even like when you read that book, like this is why Puerto Ricans always have a flag on them, right? Because we fucking weren't. It was illegal to fly a flag at some point, in history. Like the U.S. made that illegal, and when you know that, man, that now, like for me, seeing the Puerto Rican flag, it instantly just brings this warmth over me. I think knowing that background and knowing that the flying of this flag is a sign of rebellion and a sign of letting people know you're not taking my voice away at the end of the day. That's just something that came over me as I was thinking about all, Nelson.
For sure.
Dennis Nelson, this war against all Puerto Ricans. Read that book if you haven't yet, particularly if you are Puerto Rican. It's moving, it's heavy, but it's necessary to know all that information. Now, moving on to another story. I mean, this isn't affecting, Latinos who are immigrating here to this country, where there's a lot of racism, obviously, that has happened historically, but now it's co-signed in the public stage, where you have Ron DeSantis of Florida really taking aim at immigrants, passing these really crazy and strict immigration bills. I mean, I was talking about one yesterday where they're saying that immigrants who go to the hospital in Florida actually have to declare their status to the doctors, let them know if they're legal or illegal, and how that's going to deter people from wanting to get the help they may need in a hospital because they're scared of deportation. That's just the cruelest form of man, this performance art that's happening right now in terms of the Republican Party trying to see who could be more cruel than the other one, essentially. And it leads to cases like this one, right? So you had this family party in Oak Cliff, right? And it was a man who's 49 years old, Carlos Gonzalez. He's having a family party. It is a birthday party for his 6-year-old grandchild, and it ends with his murder. And it starts out with this neighbor who is, complaining apparently historically to them. He's shooting a BB gun at one of the trucks of one of the children. Then they get into a physical altercation, and Carlos Gonzalez ends up being shot dead. And now they're kind of digging into some of the past history of this neighbor and this family. And the family is telling, the news outlets that they have long been fearful of this neighbor because he harasses them and would say things like, quote, "You guys are Mexican. What are you doing here? You are not from here." And it's that comfortableness that has come across now, right? Because we've always had racism. White supremacy has always been a thing. But at least in my generation, it's been frowned upon. It's been swept under the rug. It exists in dark corners, or through the form of kind of, dog whistling, if you will, but never really outwardly like what we're seeing right now. And bills like the one we see in Florida now are empowering people who have this racist rhetoric to feel like they're taking justice into their own hands. I mean, we've seen migrants getting ran down by cars at bus stops recently. There's been all types of crazy things, and many of them are people who have heard the rhetoric of the Republican Party and then are applying that racism or that empowerment to then do their own bidding in the real world. And it's really tragic, and it's further proof that these things do mean something. When you have a person in a position of power spewing hate like this, it does have real world consequences.
Yeah, that's such a heartbreaking, like, just even the scenario, right? Like, you're celebrating your grandson's birthday and you die, right? And like, for a grandfather to see his family having survived, I don't know, I didn't get a chance to understand more about his background, but like, but like, anytime a family's patriarch his life is ended, like, it's so sad, like, on a personal level. And I think when we think about the political implications of what this means, it's like, words matter and there are consequences, right? And like, people's lives are being impacted hugely, negatively, ended, right? For the heinous crimes that are happening. Excuse the noise upstairs.
You're good.
Just let me know if you need me to mute. But no, I think that point around just like, like, this shit is real. You know what I'm saying? And, people are using immigration to spook this base of very angry, discontented, working class white people to continue to feel like their country is being taken away from them, that there is this fear mongering, right? And it's not funny. Like it's scary. Like what's happening in Florida is scary. Like the moving of migrants, like droves of people being pushed to like Kamala Harris's house or to New York. And then like we have a huge refugee crisis right now here in New York because we need to literally build temporary housing, like refugee camps. And like Mayor Adams has had to relax a lot of different protocols. And so this is like a real issue, like, and you know, he just announced today, like, that Ron DeSantis is running for president. And in my mind, when I think about Ron DeSantis, he is totally the opposite of everything I represent. Like, I'm gay, I'm Latino, I am like speaking up about my truth, and every day, like, I'm just I love Disney, right? And like that's another battle that he's facing. But like, in all seriousness, like, it's just like, bro, like, this is like inhumane, and it's for what? For power. Yeah, it's to continue to keep things the same. And I'm of the opinion that the leadership should be representative of the folks who are in your, like, of the general population. And we don't see that. And so, yeah, like, this is just fucked up. Like, it's just, it is what it is. Like, it's just fucked up. And I think why the story has gotten picked up is because it is emblematic of the real world implications of hate speech. And that this is a slippery slope, and that this base that they're appealing to is continuing to get more emboldened. I mean, January 6th was a perfect example of, like, there is a real appetite for the eroding of democracy in this country because people are, like, angry about insurrection. And it's the same people who want to continue to have guns, and there's a connection to the gun violence and everything. And I don't think it's becoming less, as you said, covert. It's overt now. Yeah. Right? Like it's named. Like, the United States is like, there's this big schism between this Trump base and the rest of the country on the coast, you know, who's like not thinking about it. So but what's lost in that political dialogue are the tangible lives on the personal level that are being lost, and the tragedies that exist. So it's you know, I think you put it really well. It's like this ultimate thirst for power, and that's it, right? Like, that's literally all people like him care about. They don't give a fuck about humanity whatsoever, right? Like, it's this level of evil, right, that is almost hard to comprehend, right? Like, the fact that you can have no regard for another person's life, their livelihood, you know, just for the sake of trying to win this popularity contest, and also what they're doing to their base, because at the end of the day, you know, I wouldn't call them victims, but they're being played by these people, right? Their worst fears are being played on, and now they're going out there and they're enacting these crazy things that this guy's going to be in jail for God knows how long at this point. You know, the insurrectionists, there was one, I think, who just got 16 years. And it's like, for what? Like, what, you know, like, this person's life is essentially over as they knew it. For what? Based on a lie that somebody told, you know what I mean? Like, because they were a sore loser and wanted to remain in power. And there's no remorse whatsoever for the fact that, like, you're playing these people for a fool. You're taking their money and now taking their freedom in cases like that one. And you're creating an atmosphere where people like myself genuinely live in fear when I see somebody walk in with an American flag on their hat or waving it, or it's on their car. Or even a red cap.
Yeah. Like, exactly. Yeah. 100%. Like, it's just this weird tension that comes over you now because the American flag has been weaponized in that manner, and it shouldn't be that way. Again, like, it's the end of like you said, democracy. They don't give a fuck about, like, the very foundation of this country that they claim to love. Like, they've been poisoned to the point that they can sit there and make an excuse for everything, right? And you see it on places like TikTok. Like, I had some troll in my comments. We were talking about banning books, and his first response was, I guess he didn't know about this, was, "Oh yeah, really? What books are they banning?" And I said, for one, they banned the biography of Roberto Clemente, a baseball player. That was literally a book that was banned, and then the response was just, "Well, who cares about that?" And it's like, you're missing the bigger picture. If you see it as a book that literally has no effect on your life whatsoever, why are they going so far as to ban it, right? Like, that's what you should be asking yourself, not just then making an excuse like, well, it doesn't really matter, so who cares what they did? Like, but that's it's like the poison that they've put in these people's mind. They really do think they are fighting for their rights. They really do think that drag queens are trying to molest their children, and trans people are, like, taking over the sports that they hold dear. It's like, it's these weird, really non-issues whatsoever that they blow up and play upon people's fear and the gullibleness, I guess, of the average human, the average American, I guess I should say.
Well, and I mean, and it, like, not even like for me personally, like where I like operate, because I'm in New York, right? Like, I feel generally safe, other than, late night, whatever. But like, I'm a straight presenting guy walking around the city, big dude, like dark skin. Like, I don't feel scared, but like the work that I do, right, is incredibly transgressive. Like, I'm doing an LGBTQ open mic, right? Like, in the future, I want to do a drag queen and queer poet story hour. And when I think about the fact that there are literally folks coming from upstate New York, from parts of Long Island, to drag queen story hours in the city to intimidate and try to silence and end those spaces. It's like, for me as a curator and as an artist, like, I'm thinking about my own livelihood, and I work at the cafe, and I could think about, like, there are venues in the city where, like, people have come and pulled up, started fires. There was a gay bar in Queens that they started a fire. There's been, like, real, like, places that if you want, like, if somebody wanted to hurt people, they could come to the spaces in which I occupy. And so now, me as an artist who's creating spaces and thinking about this, it's like, am I literally putting people in danger by curating these spaces? Am I putting myself in danger, my family? Because my family comes to these events that I do. So it is, it's real world shit. And like, it's something we have to navigate now as folks with platforms who are creating and occupy these spaces of, like, trying to talk about real shit, the truth, and people trying to scare us. But, like, the same way, like, I look up to RuPaul and La Bruja, my boss, is like artists who are doing the work to elevate and unearth experiences. It's like, I can't live my life out of fear because I became an artist to overcome that. So it's like, it's real shit that we have to navigate. And it's important because the more we talk, the more there's nothing they can argue with. And so it's, but they're old and they're going to die soon, the white guys. And, there are going to be other people taking over who are more inclined to agree with us. Like, look at Gen Z. Like, Gen Z is, like, half of them identify as, like, queer people, like queer or homosexual, right? And so there's just, like, this growing open-mindedness and understanding that, like, the world isn't as it's been presented us as. Like, the things that we thought were, like, tried and true, it's like, well, we can color outside the lines and we can do whatever we want. So I have to operate optimistically about the future, because I couldn't get out of bed any other way. But like, I just think that's the only way, like, I cope with the madness of stories like this, is like, I have to keep doing what I do too, because it is creating positive change in the world. Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's, you can't allow it to make you kind of, go and hide in a corner somewhere and never leave your house type of thing. But it is crazy. Like, it is crazy that the thought in my mind, because I've always DJ'd at a queer club in Jersey City, New Jersey. I have a lot of friends who are 626. I've been there. Anyway,
Yeah,
so,
bro, that's a spot, right?
Yeah.
So like that's one of my favorite spots to play. I have a lot of friends who are gay. I've always been cool with it. I've DJ'd the Pride Parade in New York City a bunch of times. I DJ'd the Pride Festival in Jersey City, and like as you're saying that, running through my mind is like, it's crazy when you break down the fact that all of this is on our mind just because Donald Trump happened to get in office and set off this shitstorm of turning the country in reverse direction of where it was heading, right? And I feel like anybody who's like, what's your problem with Trump? And like policies aside, political policy aside, look at the current state and the division that has come into this country as a result of this person meticulously figuring out how to play a particular group of people like puppets and have them carry out his dirty work, essentially, right? The fact that we're sitting here and you have to fear for your life because you might go to a queer club or go to the Pride Festival, all of that, for the most part, was put into play because of this person, and his 4 years in office. And when you break it down like that, dude, it boggles your fucking mind that like that is the world that we live in.
Yeah, I mean, it was he took fringe ideas and made them mainstream,
right,
and exposed a lot of the faults of our democratic system. Like he lost the popular vote. And the electoral college system is a complete farce, right? And so when we start seeing like how he won and what the various things that needed to happen, and the whole issue with Fox News being a propaganda machine like for him and propping him as king apparent for so long, like it was just there's a lot of work to be done in terms of like healing from that. And he's fucking running again, and Ron DeSantis just announced again today. And so like there's like, it's spooky, and like it's like the only thing we can do is like vote and get out there, but also like elevate more conversations like this, and reach more people and try to like combat the negative noise with positivity. So yeah, man, that's such a sad story.
Yeah, it is, and yeah, I agree. I mean, we're all we can really do is just continue to point all these things out, and hopefully it wakes some people up, or it strengthens those who maybe were on the fence politically or whatever it is, to know like kind of like this is the bigger issue at play right now. But I want to quickly touch on one more story here out of Hollywood. And I talk about this a lot. I mean, it's been spoken about a lot, the lack of diversity in Hollywood, particularly when you talk about Latin stories being told. You have Eva Longoria, who is my podcast brethren as well. She has a podcast on our network as well. She's calling out Hollywood at the Cannes Festival. And she's talking about how female directors get one at bat and have to work twice as hard. Now, she was having a conversation with Dr. Stacy L. Smith, who's a professor and researcher at Annenberg University of Southern California. And she says to feel, quote, the weight of my community and all the female directors as she began her new film, Flamin' Hot, which is about the story of the janitor who invented Flamin' Hot Cheetos. And what she's saying is, she says, quote, when was the last Latina-directed studio film? It was like 20 years ago. We can't get a movie every 20 years. She says the problem is if this movie fails, people go, oh, Latino stories don't work. Female directors really don't cut it. And this is an interesting kind of point because it is a narrative that I think even bigger than just Latina directors or Hollywood, but in general, it's like, okay, guys, here's your one chance. And if you don't knock it out of the park, if it doesn't become this gigantic hit, sorry, you lost your chance. That means your story is not universal, right? But there's not the same thing doesn't happen for white stories, right? It's not like, oh, this was a cast led by white people telling a story about suburban America. It didn't do well. I guess we shouldn't make movies led by white people, of stories in suburban America. That's never the conversation. It's just like bad script, bad this, bad that. It didn't do well at the box office. But with us, it's like we gave you a chance. Now that's it. And to her point, I think that is kind of the biggest farce that is told, is that like because one thing isn't successful, it means that our stories aren't universal.
Yeah, I mean it puts so much pressure on leaders,
Mm-hmm.
right, who are trailblazing, breaking the ground. It puts so much pressure. And it is an artist, right? Like at the end of the day, you want to make what's truthful, but it's
Mm-hmm.
hard to do that when you have the pressure, right? And so
Yeah.
it's like I think about that all the time, like as an individual, because like I've been the only Latino senior most leader in a lot of the places I've worked before, like in the Charter
Mm-hmm.
Network,
Yeah.
at a national nonprofit where I worked, and like I was like the senior most Latino dude, and I was like, okay, if I'm late to this meeting, they're going to be like, all Latinos are late to meetings, and
Right. Right.
these narratives that play out in your head,
Yeah.
so the everything she's saying is 100% true, and it's they could give more folks opportunities, and they could provide, like Hollywood could give more folks at bats,
Sure.
right? And I'm proud of Eva Longoria for making this movie and trailblazing and continuing to do what she always has done for Latinos, because there's a lot of other folks in the media who are Latino who are not like putting that out there or advocating
Right.
for Latino stories to be told. And so
Mm-hmm.
funny story about this real quick is like I'm
Yeah.
going to the White House on June 15th to
Nice.
watch a screening of this movie.
Nice.
So I literally found out about it like after you sent me the email that like, with the prep materials. I was like, oh shit,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be here. So funny
That's dope.
story. I would if I hope I'll tell Eva Longoria. I'm like, yo, I was on a podcast with one of your iHeartRadio brethren.
Yeah.
Or is it right? iHeartRadio?
Yeah, iHeartRadio, and then My Cultura is the Latin podcast network.
La Cultura. Okay, cool,
Yeah.
cool. But so yeah, at any rate, like it is like a real pressure.
Mm-hmm.
But luckily, Eva Longoria, she's a diamond. Pressure makes
Yeah.
diamonds, but I think for us, right, like folks listening, or for you and I, like I think there is, the added stakes whenever we produce anything. It's like, we don't have the privilege of just being an X, Y, and Z artist. We're not. I'm not just a poet. You're just not a DJ, right? You're a Latino DJ. I'm a
Right.
Puerto Rican poet, and on top of it, queer, and all the other identity markers that I bear.
Sure.
And so it is really unfair, but that's the world that was built, and we were born in it. And so, I think continuing to support these movies, right? Like going and watching it and encouraging other people to watch it or streaming it, however it's being put out there. And then also, like, once we are in positions of power, like making room for other people who share our identity markers to have the platform to tell their stories, like, quite frankly. And there's so many times where it's like people have the talent, but they don't have the audacity to do to take even the leap. And so I find myself even now, like I manage a team of like 20 people here at the cafe, and most of them are like artists. So I'll be at the bar and I'll be like, yo, go on the mic. Like we have an open slot. They're like, oh, no. And I'm like, do it. Come on. Like, it's not that serious. And then they go up there and then they're like thankful. But like, there is this own like helping as a leader, as a Latino leader, I strive to help silence the imposter syndrome in my brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
Because it's like, yo, like I had to do it for myself. And so now I want to help you along that journey too, because there are so many talented people who just don't put themselves out there because of that fear that they feel. So, I mean, on an individual level, that's what we can do. But I think as a collective, like supporting these Latino-led ventures, projects, like there's so many amazing Latinos that are doing amazing things in the city and all over. It's just support. I can't say that enough.
Yeah, no, 100% supporting all the projects. And I also love what you said. If you are lucky enough to get into some sort of position of leadership or have a platform, you talk about the actors who are Latino who kind of keep their mouth shut so they continue to get the roles and they're scared of I'm sure, losing that. I just question, for me personally, what kind of life is that? You know what I mean? Where you're self-serving above all else. You know what I mean? Especially if you're at the point where you're good financially and you've made the name for yourself. Why not, like a Eva Longoria, take on the burden of trying to be a bridge for the next generation, and I think it's important to have that recognition and to want to do that. I actually saw like a clip from Emilio Estevez was talking about this, and his dad Martin Sheen
his real name is like super Latino. It's like Ramon Estevez, I think. And
That's my middle name.
yeah, and so like,
Yeah.
and he was talking about his one of his biggest regrets was the fact that he changed his name to find success in Hollywood, and that now they had done this documentary, I guess, on the family, and he's credited as a producer, and he put his real name, Ramon Hernandez, on there to take that stance to say, like, you know, that
Wow.
this isn't something that I would do again. I think that's actually why Emilio Estevez kept his real name, because his dad gave him that same advice. So it's understanding that these conversations and the work you're doing or potentially could do is far bigger than just the self-serving prophecy that you know, the capitalistic culture that we've all grown up in like to teach us, you know, and especially as communities that are marginalized, like, I'm sorry, we have no choice. You know what I mean? Like, if we each don't do our part, we're not going to really have much of a community to fall back on, and we're not going to really see ourselves in any of the things that we hope we would, you know? So we all have to do our parts, to your point.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's not easy though. Like, I think there is always going to be tension between like self and the collective.
Sure.
And as a leader, like, you need to negotiate that all the time. But we can never lose sight of the collective because there's so many people that helped us get to where we are right now.
Right.
So many sacrifices that, like, I could think of like firsthand. Like, I don't even need to go that deep, but like, yeah, like, we just have to. It's too important. You know what I'm saying? Like, to like just assimilate culturally. Like, there is a trade-off, because like, before you know it, you'll be Ron DeSantis, fucking Trump, like doing evil shit just to get ahead and serve yourself. But it's like,
or Ted Cruz out of Texas, where literally, you know, your family immigrated over here, and now you've forgotten all of that because white America accepted you.
Yep, Harvard Law, and he was chilling, and it's not worth it. I mean, I believe in souls, and my soul is too important to like sully with that kind of like that negative karma. So, but yeah, man, it's hard work that we're doing, you know, like, but it doesn't always feel like, oh my God, like, you know, today, like, I was like rushing to get to work, and I was like, I could just stay home and chill, you know, but like, I feel like the work that we do matters. And so it is important for me to like push myself. And I'm sure you feel the same way. Like, so
100%.
It's a lot of work, but it is important work. And, you know, I'm happy that we could have this dialogue and continue to inspire, hopefully, other people to do the same. So
yeah, absolutely, man. I feel, you know, 100% the same way. You know, it's hard work, but it's necessary. And just like anything in life, anything that is truly worth it, you know, it takes some sort of grit and hard work to make it actually happen, right? And that's what we all just kind of have to keep in mind. Now, last thing I want to talk about is something on a much lighter note, so we'll do that for our Mi Gente segment. Mi Gente. All right, so this is like normally we honor somebody who's doing something great in our community. I mean, this man has done a lot of great stuff, but it's just a funny conversation for me. It's interesting because Bad Bunny has been on a lot of people's shit list ever since he started dating Kendall Jenner. A lot of people feel like he's kind of turning his back on the culture. And then he announces this new song, and I'm sure it was like genius marketing because the song title is in English. So everybody was like, this motherfucker's going to start singing in English now. And really, you know, he's gone full Kardashian. Then he drops it. It's in Spanish, and it's a fucking banger. And everybody's just like forgot about that part about hating him. And I just think it's an interesting conversation to be had. Is particularly, I know you're an artist. It just speaks to greatness, right? And like that greatness can kind of really prevail over so much to a degree, right? And obviously, like the shit people are mad about him is like silly stuff, but I think it is just a testament to like this man's greatness and how so many people see themselves in him, regardless of if they might be annoyed by some of the decisions that he makes.
Yeah, I mean, have you heard the song, seen the video?
Oh yeah.
Fire.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things. What were you gonna say?
No, I said amazing. It's amazing on all levels.
Yeah, like it's like I'm like all ready for summer, you know, like Bad Bunny, musically, like sonically, a match. Like I'm always gonna vibe to a Bad Bunny song. I went to one of his concerts a few years ago, and it was I've seen him at Coachella. Like he's that guy. And for
Yeah.
me, I cried because it was like of seeing a Boricua being the biggest artist in the world,
Yes.
seeing him on that stage. I like it obviously resonated on a different level for me. And I started crying like in the middle of the concert for like, and it was a beautiful tears, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, for them, a few, you know, to hear recently that he was dating Kendall Jenner, right? Who I think represents sort of like peak Nepo baby, what's wrong with Hollywood in terms of like obsession with the Kardashians, like the media. It's like, it was layered, and she's white at the end of the day, and he's Puerto Rican. And so I know for me personally, when I see a person of color with a white partner, it automatically, I'm like, and that's just me. Like that is, you know, like if they make you happy, they keep you, like who, it's so hard because at the end of the day, like as an artist, I don't want to have to always scrutinize my decisions based on what other people will think of me. That like as an artist, like I need to be free of that, because as soon as I start getting like worrying about what other people think of my art is going to lose its authenticity. It's not about pandering, it's about truth and my truth. And so if at the end of the day, like he likes her and they have a good connection, cool. Like I'm happy for Bad Bunny. Like I want him to find happiness, you know? And if that's with Kendall Jenner, like I need to withhold my judgment. But at the same time, being a Puerto Rican and, you know, like knowing other people, like I'm like, ugh. But what's beautiful about the video is that there was a brown horse and a white horse. And they were galloping together, and it was beautiful. So, and all the symbolism was there. It was just great. And I think it does speak to his greatness as a artist, because what it is his just self-awareness, right? At the end of the day, is just like understanding the noise that's out there, who he is, and then using that to like continue to fuel his art. And like it's so incredible. And it speaks to his like genius, truly. Like I think that's what it is. It's like obviously like creating good music is good, but now knowing how to use your celebrity, your fame as a tool, and not become a victim to your celebrity. Like I've rarely seen other people like navigate scandals or like controversies in such a way, like so geniusly. Rihanna, probably, you know, like, but it's iconic. And I think he has a really smart team. He's an incredible artist. And so props to the motherfucking Bad Bunny. Like always, like he's just so good. I strive to be as good of an artist as he is every single day.
Yeah, I mean, it is, we're just viewing greatness on display right now, you know, especially it's like, man, he can't miss, right? Everything feels like it's just getting better and better, which is insane to be at that level and still be producing at this high level. I think, the Kendall Jenner thing, I think it is jarring, I think, when you have somebody who's so unapologetically Puerto Rican, then kind of goes to like, I mean, obviously there's worse examples, but she's pretty far down the line of like, the negative aspects of white America, you know what I mean? Like she had the tequila company that was like obviously appropriation in the commercials, where she's like on a ranch somewhere, you know, it looks like
and then
Mexico.
The Pepsi commercial that
oh my god,
like racism.
Like the cultural unawareness of all of those things adds to it, you know what I mean? And you know, to each their own. I'm not like Dr. Umar, where I'm like against interracial dating or something like that, you know. But I do get it. I think historically, we all carry a trauma with us, right? And we can't help it, especially the more we educate ourselves, right? And knowing the history that comes along with white people being involved in our culture and the way that they have commandeered it, you know, for their own benefits and really drained us of our resources for their own benefits. I definitely get kind of the conversation that begins to happen when you have somebody who is like really all about his culture and then makes that sort of decision to go and date somebody again who represents all of the sort of negative history that is tied to it. So I definitely get that, and I'd be lying if I said that at times I like when I see certain couples and it's like somebody like that dating a white girl, I'm like I don't know, but
if we want to talk about like the implications, right, for like if like I'll say this, I'll talk about my own dad. My dad dated a white girl, and like she was like a pseudo stepmother when I was growing up, but she grew up in the project, spoke Spanish, so it was like, oh, you got this like Puerto Rican white girl, like, and it was like a flex, right? Like, and we're truly like in our community, like same thing with black men, like if it's like, oh, if you're like it's almost like a badge of honor. It's like, like a status symbol. Like, yo, I got a white girl. That's how big my like swag is. Like, I can overcome any kind of social things. And I could see this being that, like, at the end of the day, Bad Bunny is like a normal person who grew up in Puerto Rico, and a lot of the same things that happen. It's like not only is he like the biggest star in the music industry, but like now he has like one of the biggest stars in mainstream America with him. Right. And so it's like only going to add to his fame, and not to say that like this is like a business move, but understanding like that there's a lot. Yeah. This is a fascinating,
it's very nuanced. Like, but to your point, I 100% get the animosity in that regard, because she is this representation of the trophy, right? And it's the same thing with Kanye and Kim, right? Where he regards Kim as the Marilyn Monroe of our generation, right? So it's like, this is the epitome of the celebrity, of the like top tier, highest of the high white woman out there, and I got her, now I have her as a trophy type of thing. And in that regard, I definitely can understand like how the optics rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. I mean, including myself to a degree, because it is and does make you wonder, hey, on the surface level, what do they really have in common? So then it makes you think to yourself, is this just a trophy move to be able to say, I've surpassed this level of fame that I now can get one of the most sought after women in the world who has the most famous last name potentially in the world, right? So from those optics, I 100% kind of get the animosity behind it.
Yeah, it's crazy, but the song is a banger.
Yes,
and I will be listening to it.
Yeah, and I think the last thing I would say is, like you said, he's human, right? So we can have these conversations 100%, but I'm never gonna like just be like, all right, fuck him, I'm done with him. It's like, dude, this is the human experience, and the fact that we put him on this saint-like pedestal, that's our fault when he falls short of that, right? He's never claiming to be perfect or to do everything that we all want him to do. That's an unfair burden to kind of carry for us as fans to put on him, So I think, while I understand both sides of it, we just have to kind of keep, I think, both things in mind to a degree.
Yeah, it's real.
So, man, I always appreciate having you on the show. Anything you wanna promote? Let people know about where they can follow you.
Oh man, well, Dramos, thank you so much for today. It was awesome, and I had a really good conversation and digging into like topics that I'm like so passionate about, and so to have a brother in this work together, passionate about similar topics, promoting the Latino community, I love it. And
appreciate you.
We got a lot of stuff happening at the Nuyorican. It's our 50th year. We're going into renovations this fall, so if folks have never been to the Nuyorican Poets Cafe, this is your time. So keep up with us at the Nuyorican Poets Cafe, all of that one word, on Instagram. And if you want to keep following me, my work, and all the various things that we have happening with Pride and just in general, you can follow me at Nicco Diaz, NICCODIAZ.NYC on IG. And just a lot of amazing things happening in the future, man. So yes, hopefully you stay connected.
Absolutely, my dude. I like I said before we started recording, I got to pull up this summer before you guys start the renovations.
Yes, and if you want to do like a live podcast, think big, and we'll make it fucking happen. Yeah,
dude, I love it. I definitely am gonna hit you up. I got some ideas, so I appreciate you, my dude. All the work you're doing is amazing. Keep on doing it. You guys are, maintaining the culture and continuing to grow it, man. So that's important work.
Thank you, guys. All right.
Man, big shout out to my guest this week, Nicco Diaz, for hopping on the show. Always great catching up with him, and hopefully we'll do something at the Nuyorican Poets Cafe. It's a goal of mine, so I got to make that happen. Let's start wrapping everything up. No Ask a Gringo on today's show, but let's tie everything we talked about today in a neat little bow in a segment we call Conclusion Stew. Time for Conclusion Stew. All right, so we really dove into it with Nicco. I always love having him on here. He's obviously a super intelligent dude who is well-versed in a wide range of topics. But just to kind of quickly recap, I mean, this new study that talks about like 80% of Latin history has been left out of the textbooks. I mean, while it's not shocking, you know, I think anybody growing up who went to school can probably vouch for the fact that if you're a Latino, you rarely saw yourself in the history books. And even now, knowing what I know as a Puerto Rican and having done my own studying and research and all of these different things, like it's very obvious that our history was not taught in a factual manner. I mean, again, that book War Against All Puerto Ricans by Nelson Dennis is just crazy when you kind of really hear the brutality of the United States in colonizing Puerto Rico, and how none of that is ever talked about on a mainstream level. And in general, I think, to me, this speaks to a lot of what we discuss here in this show, right? A lot of us felt like we didn't necessarily belong completely to our culture, or we lived in this gray area, or even if you were surrounded by your community and those who look like you and come from similar backgrounds, I can probably speak for most of us, if not all of us, it was rare that we saw people that looked like us or came from our background in the mainstream, or in the textbooks. And now we're all kind of trying to find our identity a bit and backtrack and learn. And I think it's no wonder, again, like why as a Latin community, we're not where we need to be. And I think a lot of good, sort of observations were brought up in this conversation. You have the idea of a language barrier. You have the idea of people sort of repressing their trauma in the form of just not speaking about all that they went through. A lot of different things like that. Again, our history being, our history in this country being something that is newer in comparison to our Black brothers and sisters, for the sake of example. Obviously there's a lot that goes into it, but, when you look at who is writing these textbooks, and it's not us. So, of course, they're not going to find value in most of our stories. And as things continue to get even wackier, you have places like Florida banning books to make it even harder for stories of people of color to be told. So it's just, man, we all kind of have to, unfortunately, kind of do our own soul searching to a degree and really do our own studying, because we weren't taught these things. None of it was really mainstream, and it's definitely, I think, held us back from really having a seat at the table. Education is obviously a huge part of being able to be a part of the conversation, the greater conversation at hand. And then moving on here to, man, this really unfortunate incident where a man killed his neighbor at a family party after a fight broke out. And again, the rhetoric that this man used on a regular basis, talking about this family who were Mexican and telling them that they're not from here. And it's just, racism being empowered, right? And emboldened. And it's no secret or no surprise why a lot of these talking points that we see from Republicans or these people on the right, they all keep falling in line with this. It's crazy to think that one man in the form of Donald Trump could have had this much of an impact. And listen, white supremacy and racism all existed before him. But I think the great point that was brought up here by Nicco and myself's conversation was the idea that these were all fringe ideas. And then someone like Donald Trump came along and made them mainstream, made it acceptable for you to showcase your hate for other people, and normalized it and made it okay, and just didn't make you feel like you had to hide it anymore. And now we're seeing it come out in the most violent and disgusting ways, unfortunately. And again, as I sit here and think, like, it really felt like under the Obama years, regardless of your view on policies and things like that, it felt like we were really moving in this better direction of acceptance, of tolerance, of a world that was more accepting. And we just we shot backwards with Donald Trump. And it's crazy to think one person could have had this much of a profound effect on society at large. It's just wild to think about. And anybody who says words don't matter, you're just living in your own fantasy world. You know, when someone like Donald Trump has the platform he does and says something, it's very obvious a lot of these people will listen and literally throw away their entire lives just because of the words that he said. I mean, again, you have somebody who just got sentenced for storming the Capitol to 16 years in prison, all because this man and Donald Trump claimed that he won the election and it was stolen from him with no real evidence whatsoever. And these people are now giving up 16 years of their lives. It's just crazy. But I think the interesting part from the conversation we were having was the idea that there are Latin people in positions of power in Hollywood that don't speak up. They just, they keep their mouth shut, they assimilate, they take their roles, and they go home. And listen, I know it's unfair of me to place any undue burden on other people's shoulders, but I just think, for me personally, this work is just too important, and our community is too important to not take advantage of the fact that you are in a position of power, right? That you are in a position of influence where you possibly could extend a hand to someone else or potentially, change the fate for the next generation in some sort of way. So that's where I get a little bit frustrated, with people who are of influence from our community who don't do their part. And obviously, Eva Longoria is not a part of that. She is speaking out, which is amazing, why we love her for that. And last thing, this whole Bad Bunny song that came out, it's just a banger. I just wanted to bring that up, and this man's greatness is just wild. I think this lent itself to a really interesting sort of nuanced conversation around the idea of successful men of color and the view of white women as this sort of trophy. I think it's an interesting conversation. It's a difficult one. I think that I'm not here judging anybody. I'm not here saying that I've never, nor would I ever date outside of my culture, my community. I have, I'm not against it given the right person. But I think there are a lot of, just really interesting conversations to be had around this. And I think it's probably more so the lack of value that women of color have been given, right, in this culture that we have here. And I think that that's sort of the issue. And I guess the idea of somebody like Bad Bunny, who is very much on top of the world, representing his culture and doing it at the highest level, not just for a Latino, but for an artist in general. And then to sort of see him, even if this isn't the case, but at least the vantage point from the outside looking in, to see him sort of feed into the trope of the idea of, having a white woman trophy item as like a celebrity white woman. And, I think it's probably disappointing for a lot of people who particularly might suffer from the very real trauma of not being seen as valuable, right? And I think that speaks to the idea that, the mortality rate for Black women is higher than that of white women, right? And there are a lot of different statistics and numbers that kind of showcase the lack of value that is placed on women of color in this country and in the society that we live in. So I think, it's a complicated, conversation. I'm open to kind of having it on a deeper level. I think that's probably what a lot of the Bad Bunny backlash has been with someone like Kendall Jenner. Aside from the fact that it's also just like a Kardashian, and the Kardashians are just like, terrible for our society and have done, I think, far more harm than good as far as the things that have been normalized as a result of them becoming famous. But yeah, just some food for thought. I think it's interesting to have these kinds of conversations. And again, I'm not judging anybody for anything that they do or don't do. I just think it's interesting that these are, things that many people feel, and we can have an intelligent discussion around to kind of get to the bottom of it. Even though it's someone like Bad Bunny is kind of the catalyst, I guess, for you. The catalyst for it, I guess, on a lighter note. But anyway, I'm rambling on. Obviously, that's not necessarily the intention of this conversation. More so just shouting out Bad Bunny for putting out more fire, man. Just a great artist at the highest level. You got to love it. And that's it, man. I'm going to have a nice little weekend, Memorial Day weekend. We'll still have a show on Tuesday. I have one ready to go. I'm going to take some time off this weekend after Saturday. So I'm going to take Sunday and Monday off to just chill the fuck out, unplug. It's been a crazy, crazy week. So I hope that y'all get a chance to do the same, spend some time with family, barbecue a little bit, enjoy the outside if the weather is nice where you're at. And I'll catch you on Tuesday with a brand new episode. Till then, stay safe, enjoy the long weekend, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace.